to the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Shane. I use she and her pronouns. I'm recording today on the land of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and want to acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. I'm joined today by my co-host Jamie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Shane. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Excellent. We have with us this month Misha Panarin of mishapanarin.itch.io fame, who is a recent member of the Gauntlet. Hi Misha, thanks for joining us.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. I love the podcast.
Excellent. We've had a good run of guests telling us how much they like the podcast, which I enjoy. I don't know about anyone else.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. For our first segment, each of us gets to go over the games that we played in July and August, and we'll talk in depth about one game that we played on the Gauntlet calendar. So, Jamie, how was your gaming in July and August?
It was pretty good. It's still, well, I say a little slower than normal because I used to play, back in the day, like 5 to 8 games a week. So that's slowed down a little bit. Off the Gauntlet, I got to play Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Cozy Town. Our Blades in the Dark series is still ongoing in actual play, so that's a lot of fun. And I also got to play Tales from the Low Cantrips by Luke Jordan. It's a game that's an open playtest right now, and it's very, very good. And on the Gauntlet, I got to play The Between, so that was a lot of fun. I got to be in 2 series of The Between, and also continuing to playtest Decline Oblige. And I got to play a game from our game design camp, which is Misha's Untitled game about claim adjusters in the near sci-fi future, and that's the game I'm going to talk about today. Misha, I don't think there's a title yet for the game, right?
There is not a title yet. It's been a nightmare thrown on my side for the past month.
No, that's okay. I feel like that name will blossom at some point. But basically, in this game, we play as underpaid and overworked claim adjusters who investigate insurance claims for ships and freighters. So it's a game of mystery where capitalism is the true horror. It's a Carve from Brindlewood game with some specific inspirations from The Between 2, which is very, very cool. I'm very excited to see how there are more Carve from Brindlewood games. I feel like it's a really great growth from PBTA towards mystery games, investigation games, which is super, super fun. So just as a disclaimer for everything else I'm going to say about the game, this is very much a work in progress, if that isn't obvious with the missing title at this point. And I got to play a version that Misha worked on for about a week. I really have to stress how amazing it was that Misha put this together in about a week. So it's part of our game design camp initiative here on the Gauntlet. And it's our first try creating such a camp that's to support game designers working on their own games and working on a specific game throughout the course of the 2-month camp, which has been a lot of fun. It's much in the same vein as in the tradition of the game facilitator camp here in the Gauntlet. So I really do love and appreciate how the Gauntlet is finding more ways to support the folks who are on here, because I think there's a very huge trend of some folks making games, playtesting games, and it's really fun to be part of the tradition of the Gauntlet, like supporting that and being there for people who want to make games. So what worked for me with this game is I really love the premise. It's a sci-fi setting, and the office/corporate underpaid and overworked investigators is just so good. We don't get enough sci-fi TTRPGs in general, to my preference anyway, and this one has an especially cool premise that I feel a lot of us can relate to. It's very easy to draw upon the experience of being a cubicle worker that has to work within the confines of a system. This is a game that explores the themes that are closer to life, that are so much fun to play, and I wish I saw more of it. It also leans into what Brindlewood Bay feels like old women hanging out with their friends. It feels like that's easy to draw upon, that camaraderie. And so in the same vein, it feels easy to draw upon. You're all suffering together under capitalism in this office, and you're all trying your best. So I really like that. I tapped into my past as a call center agent and the immense general customer service background I have, which was super cathartic and fun. If not a little creepy, I was a little worried about how easily those scripts came to me while I pretended to talk on the phone with with a client slash possible suspect. So that was super fun. And even in the early stages of the game, it's super enjoyable. There are lots of great little mechanics, lots of great little bits that Misha did with the Car from Brindlewood Bay system that I really appreciate even this early on. And so far, my favorite mechanic, it's hard to pick one, but my favorite mechanic was light a beacon. After you make a roll, you can choose to light a beacon, and another player will volunteer one of their unique questions on their playbook that they can ask of the other player. And it's sort of like a peek into their past, gives us this like cool flashback moment of the character. This is a really cool twist on the Crowns of Brindlewood Bay and the Masks of the Between. And I like how it connects one character to another. So usually when you go through these flashbacks in Brindlewood Bay or the Between, even though it's enjoyable for the other players to watch, it can still feel like you're spotlighting one character and one player a lot. So the fact that you can have another player volunteer the question of their playbook and connect it to you, it feels more like a shared experience, which I really enjoyed. And so I got to answer the question, who did you betray and why did you tell yourself it was the right thing to do? That was super, super fun because up to that point, I was playing this really like, well-meaning, if not messed up, failed manager who was demoted to get to that point where they were just this charming, somewhat silly, overconfident person and then suddenly have to answer a dark question like that. It gave a lot of nuance to the moment that I really appreciated. So what I'm less sure about, there's very little. The game is in such a good state even this early on. I'm really excited to see where it heads. But if there's one thing, originally Misha's pitch for the game had more of a horror vibe to it, and in general, I just love horror games. So it'd be cool if there was a possibility to go into dark comedy territory. It'd be really funny to be like these really overworked people during the day phase, if there is one, and then during the night phase, have to go through this immense horror on the ships and the freighters. I think that would be really hilarious. I think it could hit on some dark comedy bits. I don't see a lot of dark comedy in TTRPGs in general, so that could be fun. But even if Misha doesn't decide to take the game in that direction, I'm just excited to see what happens next. So no pressure, Misha.
All right, I keep that in mind.
Yeah, just make the game you want to make.
What you just said just gave me an idea. I definitely want to see. Speaking of like the overall theme and vibe of the game, what if the equivalent of the night phase is called the unpaid overtime phase?
Truly, it's horrifying.
Amazing.
It's truly horrifying, yeah. Much scarier than London at night.
It's true. Mandatory unpaid overtime. Yes, absolutely.
Oh my god.
Right, where you quotation mark volunteer, but you are expected to volunteer. Okay, I'm getting flashbacks, yes.
Yeah, I want to say that it was a joy to playtest this with you and everybody else at the game design camp. And I would like to bring attention to how spot on Jame's customer service voice is. We were not ready for it. Like, the reaction it got at the table was just amazing. We stopped playing for a few minutes.
I used to be very good at being a customer. They used to bring me in for the emergency hard cases. Oh, wow, that was years ago, but some things just don't leave you. I still have the scars from that time. My takeaway from the game is, for the first game design camp, I wanted to focus on bringing in folks who are like me, so specifically folks who are BIMPOC, which means Black, Indigenous, mixed race, people of color. And I'm really glad I did. It's been really great with the four of us focusing on making games, and it's difficult for me to describe how much of the TTRPG space assumes a specific perspective and takes it to be the objective truth and norm of the world. And this is the perspective of the cisgender heterosexual white male. Even like, I didn't realize how I myself had sort of like bent and made way and shifted my own perspective to better accept and better work within this paradigm. Even though it's not true, it's not a perspective that many of us who play TTRPGs because we're not all that kind of person, right? So it's really great to be able to be in this creative space with other game designers that are really bringing in their backgrounds and their perspectives, and I can feel how different it is. Like, even I think this is a game a lot of people would enjoy regardless of your background, but I think Misha's distinct perspective is really coming through even this early in the game. And Misha was inspired by numerous touchstones, such as the TV show The Expanse, the video game Tacoma, among others. But I really felt like Misha really made it their own, and I'm really excited to see where they take it in the future. So in general, I'm really excited for RPG Latin America, which is this really cool movement that's starting up on Twitter. It's very much in the same vein as RPG Southeast Asia. So you can look up RPG LATAM, and you can find Misha and a lot of great creatives who are working on games. It's super exciting, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to keep making in the future. So thank you so much, Misha, for being part of the game design camp, and thank you so much for making this awesome game. It's really, really cool.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been having a lot of fun, learning a lot, and I look forward to our camps every Sunday.
That sounds so awesome. I'm really excited not only for Misha's game, which sounds incredible, but for all the other games that are going to come out of the design camp.
Oh yeah, they're really good. I'm so excited
Yes.
to like have people know more about like Thomas's game and Agatha's game too. So it's gonna be great. Yeah.
I can't wait. Misha, do you want to tell us about your gaming in July and August?
Sure, yeah. Off Gauntlet, I played a little bit of Blades in the Dark, which I love, Aegon, which same, Free from the Yoke, which we played, but we kind of made it our own. I played it with friends from Argentina, and we basically did this ad hoc reskinning of Free from the Yoke to make it about post-colonial 19th century Latin America, which was, one, a lot of fun, two, surprisingly easy to reskin. I also played Monster of the Week, finally got to play Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands, which I loved, and also Bakamitai, a playtest of my own Paragon playset based on the Yakuza series of video games, which I will be talking about more later. And on the Gauntlet, I've only played one game, which was a first session run of Moth-Light, which I enjoyed immensely. Moth-Light is a very dramatic, forged-in-the-dark science fiction game that is set in a post-fall civilization plagued by alien predators known as moths. It's all about forming pacts, as the game calls them, and working together while also pursuing personal goals and cementing the bonds you have with your fellow survivors. There's a lot of very diverse touchstones and inspirations that go into Moth-Light, and they can have like different levels of protagonism, because one thing that I thought was super cool about Moth-Light is that it asks you as a table to have a conversation, like a session zero kind of thing, about genre and style. So when you talk about genre, you define whether you want to play a game that is set in the near future, hard sci-fi, speculative fiction, science fantasy, pop sci-fi, or just straight up fantasy. When you talk about style, you talk about TV and movie touchstones. The options you have for style are serial camp, or serial prestige, or a blockbuster film, or animation, or action RPG. The game we played in the Gauntlet ended up being a mixture of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind with a little bit of the video game Horizon Zero Dawn, which are two things that I love immensely.
Yeah, that's such a good combination.
That was super fun. But if you wanted to do something more like The Martian, or more like something more horror like Dead Space or Alien, or if you wanted to do like Mass Effect, you can do it. Moth-Light is both flexible and powerful enough to allow for that. And I think that's one of its strongest points. On top of this, and maybe because of this, you also do a lot of collaborative world building, which is another thing that I really love about tabletop RPGs. I thought it was also extremely cool how the quick start that is available for playtesting, by the way, you can find Moth-Light on HIO. It's moth-lands.hio/Moth-Light, and you can buy the RPG on itch. The quick start that we played was called the Scavenger Pact, which is one of the many types of pact which sort of replace like the crew playbooks from vanilla Blades in the Dark. And the Scavenger Pact is it's a survival story. Like when we choose this pact, we play as individuals stranded in a harsh environment with no obvious avenue of escape. So our campaign was mostly about recovering materials from the wilderness, recruiting and rescuing our fellow survivors, and holding on to hope so that we might escape with our lives. Which, spoiler, we did, we succeeded, which was obviously very satisfying. It makes a lot of changes to the base Forge in the Dark experience, which mostly I really liked. One thing that I thought was very cool was that the overall tone also sets the position for roles. So if the overall tone of the session or the campaign is desperate, then nearly every role is going to be from a desperate position.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as time goes on, and there is this little time tracking track which foretells this doom that you are trying to either avert, escape, or defeat, then the tone starts getting more and more desperate, and there's actually like an additional level of desperation that is not present in Blades in the Dark, which is perilous. We played a lot of our campaign in the perilous tone, and that was quite an experience because it really helped drive home the overall tone that we were going for. Like, we started in a very Nausicaa kind of thing, and just like Nausicaa, the stakes got raised very high very quickly.
Ooh, yeah, that's definitely what the film is like. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. Big shout out to Agatha, our GM, who did an amazing job with this, and big shout out to all my fellow players. One thing that I really loved also about Moth-Light was that as part of character creation, on top of picking your playbook and everything, you also have a collaborative pact, which in our case was that we swore to build a beacon so that we could send a distress signal out to the heavens, because we were playing in this Bronze Age-ish campaign. Very much like, Horizon Zero Dawn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
On top of that, you also have your individual belief, which is somehow related to the pact. Like, for instance, mine, and I was playing a playbook called The Will, which is a disciplined spiritualist and adept. And my belief was I must learn to use the networked constructs to spread our plea for help. And your belief is important because at the end of the session, you mark XP if you express your background, your drive, or your beliefs. But also, the game asks you if you remain true to the pact, which is a very powerful question. You actually have to ponder it because the situation is so desperate and it all seems so hopeless that you do end up having doubts about the pact. So if you say you have doubts about the pact, you have to record doubt, which is kind of similar to harm in a normal Forge in the Dark game.
Ooh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at my character sheet right now, and the doubts that I recorded throughout the campaign were the network is speaking but the others aren't listening, and wrong assumptions turned my world inside out.
Cool.
Yeah. And if you ever have 3 doubts recorded, you enter crisis and act out.
That sounds like real life. Yeah.
It does sound like real life, yeah. Sadly, like, our campaign was a little too short. We played 4 sessions, and the Scavenger Pact suggests you play around 6.
Oh.
So we had to rush through a lot of it, and we were not able to actually see any of the PCs acting out, but I would have loved that. Overall, yeah, I really enjoyed the game, and especially these aspects of it. What I'm less sure about was that harm felt really crushing in a way that could maybe clash with the tone a little. I feel like it makes sense how brutal and crushing harm was for the kind of game we were playing, but if we had been playing something more akin to,
Like
let's say, Mass Effect.
Yes, yeah, I was exactly thinking Mass Effect. Yeah.
Yeah, like that kind of death spiral, very crushing harm, would have been a very jarring clash with the tone we were going for. And also, there's one mechanical choice that I would have liked to test out a bit more because I wasn't so sure about what exactly it added. So, you know how in Vanilla Blades, you build your dice pool by adding 1 die for every dot you have in the relevant action rating. Whereas in Moth-Light, you take 1 action die according to the attribute rating that is related to the action rating you are using. It felt like you had more dice in your pool than you were supposed to.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and I felt it a little bit unintuitive, especially compared to how intuitive counting up dots in your action rating is.
Right.
But I would definitely have to play this game again in a very different setting and tone. Which is basically my main takeaway for this game. I love the open-ended world building. I feel like it has so much room. It's flexible, but also very powerful. And it does convey its intended tone and touchstones in a very effective way. So I do want to play Moth-Light again. I want to play a longer campaign, maybe a different pact. And I want to play it in a totally different setting. I'm super excited for this game, and I definitely want to read the final version the moment it's out.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
Do you know, one of my secret gaming shames, well, I guess it's not a secret because I'm about to say it on the podcast, is that I've never played a Forged in the Dark game.
Oh, no.
I have my first one on the calendar for next month. So
which game is it?
Oh,
I'm going to run Extracurriculars, which I can't remember the designer's name, but it's about high school sports drama. One of my favorite genres of entertainment.
I love
so
it.
really excited to try the game.
Oh, I've seen that, and it's a really different take on Forged in the Dark that I'm really excited about. Cool. I can't wait to hear about it.
All right, that's awesome. So let me tell you about my July and August in games. Off the Gauntlet was relatively quiet. I played a little 5e, some Thirsty Sword lesbians, and Melbourne, where I live, has now been in lockdown for so long that I could convince my housemates to play a game with me, so we tried For the Queen.
So when they're trapped and have no place to escape to, we can introduce games.
Exactly. So I thought For the Queen would be a good start. One of my housemates absolutely hated it, which
I
thought it was such a good attraction. He is definitely on the more like, I would like some maths, I would like some, some modifiers, some odds.
Fair.
The sort of open-endedness was a problem. On the Gauntlet, They Came to Play Ball, which I talked about last month, as well as Stewpot, another Firebrands game, which was really fun. I ran a couple of sessions of my Carve from Brindlewood game, Brindlewood Baywatch. That was really fun as well. I finally got to play Alice is Missing, which I had been wanting to try since you raved about it on the podcast a couple of months ago.
How did you like it?
I mean, I think I had quite mixed feelings about it. Like, the immersive qualities of it are so incredible. Like, I felt like a real heart-pounding, like, thriller-style tension that I don't think I've experienced in any other games. But at other points, I felt myself a bit confused about how things were supposed to work, or found some of the interactions between different things that were happening in the game a bit off-putting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I continued my quarterly game of the Yellow King role-playing game, which I think I'll probably talk about next month when we're finished up. And as Jamie mentioned, The Between finished up a 10-session run. That was such a fun game. I
So
really
good.
recommend it.
Great climax.
Yeah, it came to a really good conclusion, which I think is, I talked about this when I was talking about Brindlewood Bay a couple of months ago, but the way that the climax mechanics of those games works, I think is really great design. And I also played, I'm sorry, did you say Street Magic, which is what I'm going to talk about in more detail. So, I'm sorry, did you say Street Magic, which you can also find on itch.io, is a city building story game by Caro Assertion. It's a GM-less game, and essentially as you play through the game, you build up this city. It's not a map-making game, very explicitly. More about creating conceptual connections, directions, things like that, rather than a north, south, east, west type arrangement. You work through a series of rounds where each player gets to create neighbourhoods or landmarks or residents, and each round ends in an event that changes the city in some way. What worked for me about this game? I think it has a really great structure of play, so the way that you start with safety tools, you move on to talk about tone. There's a foundation round, which gently starts to sort of onboard you with some basics about how the game's going to work, and then you progress into rounds that make up the bulk of the game that you're well prepared for by that point, and then there's a final round that has a kind of interesting variation on what you've been working with that far. It was really fun playing with Rich and Max, both of them super creative, full of ideas, lots of fun, bouncing off each other. That was really great. I love that the game has such a strong emphasis on change and transformation. It's easy for me to imagine a city building game where what you create is quite a static object, something more like a map, whereas this was all about creating dynamic changes, movements, effects, interactions, things like that, which is really resonant with the way I think about cities, as well as, what I think is exciting in a game. The game text includes an afterword that's about the thematic and social aspects of the game. I thought that was really interesting. I always like it when a game includes something like design notes or, some comments from the designer about why they've done things the way they did. That's always really fascinating to me. But this sort of takes it a step beyond those sort of design notes I'm used to, which are about, here's why it's an extra D6 and not a +3 design notes, to talk about ideas that fuel the game, ideas about urbanism, about cities, about sovereignty. I just found that really fascinating, and I'd love to see more designers sort of talk explicitly about the thematic underpinnings of their games. That section ends by explicitly encouraging players both to take time at the start of the game to acknowledge First Nations people who lived and live on the land that you're playing on, and to consider making a donation to your local native community of time, money, or some other tangible benefit. I thought that was really interesting and really important. I think we've probably all seen more games recently that include quite explicit political statements in them. I think especially of games that say fascists can't play this, variations on that have been getting more common. I would love to see something bubbling up alongside that says to play this game, you must support your local Aboriginal or First Nations communities.
Oh, right. Like suggesting specific action to be supportive to your local communities. Yeah, that's such a great idea.
Yeah, and it includes a link to a site that can tell you about local First Nations peoples in Canada, which I assume is where Caro Assertion is from. But yeah, I thought that was a really great addition and a wonderful idea. What I was less sure about, it was a little unclear to me what was the best way to convert this from in-person to online play. Of course, we were playing online. The description of how you play in the game is about index cards that are laid out on a table that you can put on top of each other, you can move around physically, things like that. I'm sure there's an app online that would be absolutely perfect for this, but I am not across all of the modern apps and things like that. People on the Gauntlet had some suggestions. I'm sure half the listeners are just basically screaming at their earbuds saying, well, of course it would be easy, you would just use this, but it wasn't really obvious to me. We played just using a Google Doc, which was something that Rye from the Gauntlet had used when he'd run the game earlier. That worked super well for me because paragraphs and indentations and embedded writing is how I think and it's how my brain works. But I think Rich and Max expressed that they both found that wasn't such a useful way to organise the information for them. I also found, and I think this is quite common in a lot of GM-less games, and also more generally with role-playing games, it was a bit hard to get started without a GM sort of pushing in a certain direction and making things happen. A little bit hard to get the game kicked off and moving. I think that was partly because I mentioned that Rich and Max are both really wonderful players, but none of us had played with each other before. So, it's a little, even that little bit harder with strangers. Often not so much because people are shy as because people are polite and they don't want to be the one to set a direction. They want to let everyone else do that first. And so there's this awkward hesitancy before we get going.
I've been in a few games where I was the only non-American in the game and everybody was from the Midwest, and I saw that. I thought we were polite in the Philippines, but I did not come across Midwesterners until that moment. So yeah, I can see what you mean.
Yeah. The day that we're recording this, I'm going to be playing this game with my home group tonight to create a setting for a Thirsty Sword Lesbians game that we're going to run. I think that will work really well.
Such a good idea.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the intended uses for the game, and I think it will work really well in that way, making sure all the players get to have a say and invest in the setting that we're playing in. And I think that will work well because we all do know each other and we're comfortable with each other. But for playing with strangers online or people that you're less familiar with, I think some more clarity about the kind of setting or city that you're going to be trying to build in advance would be good. We joked during the session that it would be really fun to do for a setting, a variation on a setting that we were all familiar with. We talked about Waterdeep or Sigil from old Dungeons and Dragons editions. And, I can imagine that it would work really well if you had a bunch of Star Wars fans who were making a Star Wars city or something like that.
Yeah, or like a Dark Sun campaign. I haven't played Dark Sun for years, but somehow I'm just thinking that would be super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I were to pick, I would definitely want to play this game and make our own version of Fallen London.
Yes.
Ooh, nice.
I think anything like that would really help. The way that the game is set up, you pick 3 adjectives from a list to help define the direction that the city is going to go in. Mm-hmm. But I felt like we just needed a bit more sort of structure or shaping for what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think would be a really good addition is the palette from, I think originally from Microscope, where the players take turns to say things that they do and don't want included in the game. Not just in a safety tools way, but we decided we were going to have a cyberpunk setting, but that can mean really different things to different people.
Yeah.
I think it would have been cool to start out by saying, well, look, I don't want robots. Oh, I would like robots. Getting a bit of a better sense of what cyberpunk actually meant to the people at the table.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's really funny, though, because I felt very differently when we got to play I'm Sorry, Did You Say Street Magic for the game facilitator camp. Mm-hmm. And I really liked how we only had a few objectives to begin with. And I really liked how we started from this really simplistic, almost 2D kind of feeling. And then by the end of it, we had this really complex HBO kind of show about a city on the verge of open rebellion.
Yeah.
But I also understand where you're coming from, Shane. I think that's also a very legitimate thing to keep in mind when you're playing the game. So yeah, really interesting.
I agree. I love the palette from Microscope. I wasn't so sure about it until I actually played Microscope. We were playing this sci-fi thing kind of inspired by Battlestar Galactica. And we had a very long argument about FTL, which is something that I have such strong feelings on. If you ever want me to talk your ear off for an hour, just ask me my opinions on FTL.
Okay, taking note.
All right,
So yeah, the palette was very convenient and useful for us, and I can definitely see how it would also be just as useful and convenient in I'm Sorry, Did You Say Street Magic?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and useful idea for a lot of games. I'm playing in a Aegon-inspired game at the moment, Rising Tide, that Dan Brown's running.
Ooh.
And we started that with the palette as well. I think it's a really useful tool. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you were saying, Jamie. I think there is a kind of double-edged sword when you're designing around a game like this. You want as much openness as possible, but openness comes at the expense of a level of structure. And so there's a kind of back and forth between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Takeaway, just a really fun, interesting game. I recommend starting with a more defined idea of the kind of city that you want to make, unless that you are playing with people who are comfortable with something much more open-ended and ready to bring their own ideas. And like I said, I'm going to use this tonight to kick off a campaign of Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I expect it to work really well in that context and to be a super fun time.
The next Gauntlet Community Open Gaming will be happening the weekend of October 14th through the 17th of 2021. GCOG is the Gauntlet Gaming Community's free online tabletop RPG convention. Over the weekend, we'll be offering more than 24 sessions with games like Brindlewood Bay, Monster of the Week, Hearts of Wulin, Star Wars Swoop Gangs, and more. All sessions are run with a set of safety tools and follow the Gauntlet Code of Conduct. Registration opens Monday, September 20th at 12 o'clock noon U.S. Eastern Time. We created the con to help new players get used to online play, showcase indie games, and introduce folks to our community. If you want to check out the event listings, go to bit.ly/GCOG events, all smushed together. For more detail on registration and procedures, go to bit.ly/gauntlet-community. We hope we'll see you there.
So for our second segment, Misha is going to talk about a game that you've been working on. Is that right?
That is correct. Or, well, I should say it's a Paragon playset rather than a full, complete game. This Paragon playset, which for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically like a hack of John Harper's and Sean Nittner's Aegon, the game of mythopoetic Greek heroes. And this game that I'm working on is called Bakamitai, and it is inspired by the Yakuza series of video games.
So I feel like 99% of people listening to this know exactly what that is, but I am not a video game person, so can you explain what are the Yakuza video games?
Well, it's a Japanese series of video games that are mostly on consoles. Just a few latest ones are available on PC that deal with the Yakuza, the organized crime families of Japan throughout various eras. Like Yakuza 0, for instance, is set in the 80s, and Yakuza Like a Dragon, the latest one, is set in modern times. But they're always set around small districts or neighborhoods in Japanese cities. And these games behave a lot like regular RPGs, like you walk around town, you complete quests, level up, get money, get into fights, but they also have so many minigames that it is so easy to just neglect the main story and play minigames all day. Like if you want to play bowling or mahjong, or if you want to play the karaoke or disco dancing minigames, all of that is available, and so many more that I cannot think of off the top of my head right now. A lot of the appeal of Yakuza, at least to me, are the minigames.
Yeah, I started playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, and my favorite minigame so far is the one where you try to stay awake in a cinema.
Yes.
And you have to fight with these surreal animal-headed creatures. You have to push back against them trying to get you to fall asleep. It's really hilarious.
Yeah, that minigame is so funny, so much fun. It's really challenging.
It is.
Well. So this absurd gonzo vibe that Yakuza has, that contrasts with the very serious and dramatic, but also very self-aware tone of the main story, is what I was trying to capture with Bakamitai. The name itself being a reference to, I guess it's the most famous song from the karaoke minigame, to the point that it's kind of a meme.
Yeah, the whole time you've been talking about this, I keep hearing the song in the back of my head. Not even back of my head, it's right in the front.
Yeah, I catch myself singing it all the time because it is so catchy. For this playset, I wanted to capture that vibe, but also, because I cannot help myself, make some kind of commentary on capitalism, because I wanted to show like this glitzy neon opulence that is so associated with the 80s in Japan specifically, which was, as we know now, a total lie, not just because that specific economic bubble burst, but also because that life of luxury and opulence was only a reality for a very small amount of people. Like everybody else who wasn't a CEO or whatever just had to go to work as usual and did not see a single penny from that economic boom. So, in that vein, one of the most significant changes that I made to the Aegon formula was what in Aegon is the divine favor, the various Greek deities you can call on to bolster and support you. But instead of having gods, in my game you have friends. They're just called friends. There are 12 named NPCs, each of them with their own specialty. Like one of them is a stand-up comedian, and another has a noodle shop, and another one is a disco king. That is his in-game description. So instead of calling on gods for help, you just call on your friends. You ask them a favor and they try to help you with whatever it is that you are doing. If their specialty somehow comes into play, then the size of the die that they give you is going to be like one step higher. So instead of a d4, it's going to be a d6. And whereas in Aegon, the deities are related to another mechanic called the Vault of Heaven, which tracks the favor and the wrath that you have with each of the gods, I've separated that from the actual friends mechanic and instead represented 5 crime families that are in this fictional district in 80s Tokyo. And the whole plot, so to speak, of Bagamitai is that these 5 families have somehow divvied up this district in order to, make the most money and become powerful and influential. And your goal as a party of players is to drive them out. When you manage to drive 3 of them out of the district, you basically win the game. The campaign is over and you have succeeded. The game is divided into what is called story missions and side quests. Story missions are the equivalent of islands in base Aegon, like the more involved, multi-layered main chunks of story and gameplay. And side quests are basically very small stories, and the book encourages GMs and players to figure out what kind of silly side quest material kind of stories they want to contribute in order to regain the favor of your friends. You want to have the support of Tatsuro, the Disco King, for your next mission because you feel like he's going to be useful somehow. So you have to do him a favor first. And that can be, whatever you like. It's resolved with a single roll, exactly like in Aegon. And whoever is best in this contest gets to decide who gets Tatsuro, the Disco King's favor.
I feel like I would always want the Disco King's favor, but I'm very biased.
Yes, of course. Also, I really love the music genre, and it might be controversial to call it a genre, but city pop, which is a way to denominate a certain kind of Japanese pop from the 70s and 80s, which is very related to the kind of aesthetic and vibe that I'm going for with Bagamitai. So a lot of the NPCs, like 10 out of the 12, are named after famous city pop singers.
Oh, that's right. I thought some of the names were familiar. That is so cool.
Specifically, Tatsuro, the Disco King. Like anybody who has fallen in the city pop rabbit hole on YouTube will be familiar with that name.
Oh my gosh, I have fallen down that rabbit hole, but it's like something I put in the background to get into this meditative out-of-body state. So, but I should pay special attention.
Yeah, I totally
to the
get that. Yeah, that's another of my special interests. Another thing I can talk about for hours.
Okay, adding it to the list. So faster than light travel and City Pop, got it.
Yes. So I think one of my favorite things that I did with this game that also went over really well in playtesting was the way I changed the domains. So in Aegon you have domains like Blood and Valor and Art and Oration. And here they're kind of similar. A few of them are pretty much the same. But one domain is just about the minigames. It's called Downtime and Vice. So anytime you're about to save the day by singing or dancing or going bowling or whatever, you're going to roll with your Downtime and Vice domain.
Perfect.
Yeah. I got to playtest this with some friends. Well, 2 friends and somebody that I didn't know much, and the playtest went super well. It was a lot of fun. It was really funny. It did reveal that you absolutely 100% need the kind of player buy-in that you only get from having played and enjoyed the Yakuza video games. If you do not have that touchstone, then maybe this game just isn't for you, and that's fine.
Oh no!
Yeah, sorry, Shane. You have to play Yakuza.
Well, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
And then you have to play this. They're long games.
You can start with Yakuza Like a Dragon, though I know it's very different
Yes.
from the vibe, but there's
Yes.
a lot of the same energy in Yakuza Like a Dragon that I really love.
Yeah, plus I think that the protagonist from Like a Dragon, Ichiban, is so likable.
So likable. I love him. He is just a lovable himbo.
Yeah, he is a lovable himbo, just like every Yakuza protagonist. But for your convenience, Shane, picture somebody who went to jail in the 80s, got out in 2010, and the first thing he did out of jail was get a very, very bad perm.
Yeah. It's so painful. It's so painfully bad.
All right, I am sold. As soon as we finish this recording, getting on eBay, finding myself a copy.
Yeah. One of my playtesters was my friend Maxi, who I love Maxi dearly, and he is my weebiest friend by far, and also the number 1 Yakuza fan that I know. Lowell isn't here, and maybe he would argue. He is the number 1 fan. But I know Maxi, and nobody loves Yakuza like he does. And he really enjoyed the game. He had a lot of fun, and that was the glowing recommendation that I needed. So my overall takeaway from making this game and playtesting it and doing the layout, which was also an adventure because I decided to go all in on the vibe and the actual PDF. It is meant to look like the booklet in a city from the 80s. If you remember buying actual music CDs and reading the booklet for the lyrics and whatever, that's kind of what the Bakamitai PDF looks like.
Yeah, I was just going to single out that, the layout, the design on this is
gorgeous.
So good. It's just stunning.
It's so beautiful, the colors. Though this is also the part where I pretend I'm not old enough to have very clear memories of these CD jewel cases and their pamphlets. Misha, I think you did such a good job. The layout is absolutely gorgeous. Even though, because you said this is your first time working with Affinity Publisher so much, but it doesn't show. It's absolutely gorgeous, really stunning.
It's my first time working with Affinity Publisher on anything that isn't black text on white background. I did make a single page of Morkborg style layout,
Ooh.
But that's a wholly different beast.
Nice.
It's part of a project that I'm working on. I want to bring monsters from Guarani mythology into Morkborg.
Ooh, so cool.
Guarani being the indigenous people who live in the northeast of Argentina, all of Paraguay, the south of Brazil.
Awesome.
Hacking bits of Aegon makes you really realize and appreciate why things are the way that they are in vanilla Aegon. If you go too far with changes, it breaks. And I think that actually speaks really well of Aegon as a holistic system rather than just a set of mechanics. Working on this, which was a labor of love, also made me appreciate Aegon even more than it did. And Aegon is a system that I really love, so that was a tall order to...
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's a fun part about hacking. It makes you really appreciate where the designers came from and
Yes.
what makes the game really work and sing. Yeah, that's super exciting. I would love to play Bakamitay one day.
I would love to run it. I will definitely consider running it on the Gauntlet.
Misha, please run it on the Gauntlet.
Yeah, I will. I'll talk to Lowell.
Excellent. Listeners, in our final segment, each of us talks about something which is creating joy for us right now. So, Jamie, what is giving you life?
What is giving me life is just a couple of days ago, I got to rewatch Die Hard, the best Christmas movie starring Bruce Willis. And because my partner, Matthew, has never seen Die Hard in full, and I feel like it's so hard to describe how watching Die Hard feels like a religious experience. And I haven't watched it for a long time either, so it was really fun watching it again and seeing Matthew watch it for the first time. He was just completely blown away by it. Watching it again, I realized how well crafted the movie is. Like, there are all these tiny bits and pieces of plot and character that fit so perfectly that it actually forced me to turn off my game designer brain. But it's really good. And it's September, right, when we're recording this. And in the Philippines, Christmas starts in September. Like, if it's safe to go to the malls and everything, they would start playing Christmas songs in September. And they don't stop until February, by the way. I have to point that out. Until Valentine's Day rolls around. That's when they stop.
That is literally half the year.
It is. We're really ridiculous here. It's really over the top here. But that's how I decided to start my Christmas season, watching Die Hard. So that gave me a lot of life. It was super, super fun.
Great choice. All right, Misha, what's giving you life?
What's giving me life is that I've been rewatching a very classic TV show from Argentina, which came out in 2003 originally. It's called Los Simuladores, which got translated as The Pretenders in English, I think. And it's mostly aged super well, and it's a joy to watch. I often use this show as a touchstone when I'm pitching Blades in the Dark to people in Argentina. Because the protagonists are a group of con men. But, instead of doing it to get rich, their goal is to help common people with their problems by executing highly elaborate cons against the people who are wronging them. And sometimes the cons are like this very casual thing, and sometimes they're like wildly elaborate. And it's always fun to see the kind of Ocean's 11 thing where you see the plan come together, and the four main protagonists are very likable in their own way. And the episodes are so varied. Like, sometimes in one episode, that's one of the more famous episodes, they are conning a swindler who pretends to be a manager for models, and they con him into joining this fake Survivor-like reality show, and they send him to the middle of the jungle in northern Argentina. Or in another one that I really love, and a lot of memes have come from this specific episode, they help a girl's very crass working class family make a good impression on her boyfriend's very rich family.
Oh my gosh, much relate. Aww.
In another episode, they help somebody with a corrupt policeman, and in another one of the more out there episodes, they pretend to be a clan of vampires in order to save a retirement home from being sold.
Oh, so good.
Wow.
You're really selling the show.
Yes,
is there
absolutely.
a way we can find it?
The very first episode, I saw it on YouTube with English subtitles. They're not perfect subtitles, but they're like good enough that you're able to tell what's going on.
Okay, I'm gonna look for that.
I do not know if the rest of the show is available, but at least the first episode, which is one of the better episodes in my opinion, is available on YouTube. I will send you the link later. So yeah, rewatching this has been giving me life.
Amazing. I actually had quite a lot of trouble deciding what I would talk about in this segment because there were two things that are really like neck and neck. So I just want to acknowledge the very near runner-up that was Dawn of Chromatica, the new Lady Gaga. So good.
Ooh.
But what is my official choice for giving me life right now is Virgo season. my season, my time of year.
Yay.
Probably my equivalent of faster than light travel if we if we want to extend this segment out to an hour or so. I'm extremely ready to do that, but I'll just try and keep it short. I just wanted to read, I'm subscribed to so many astrological email lists and Instagram accounts and things like that. This is from Cosmic Prescription, Cosmic RX, which you can check out if you're interested. They wrote that Virgo's lesson is to tune into being of service, not from obligation, but from the heart and from a place of joy, to learn how to give only when they have the resources and when their energy is being honoured, appreciated, and reciprocated. And that is the Virgo energy that I would like to share with everyone listening.
Oh gosh, as a Capricorn, I always deeply appreciate Virgos, so...
Well, thank you.
You're outnumbered right now. Listeners, that's our show. The Gauntlet Podcast is a production of The Gauntlet. We have an online gaming calendar, the Gauntlet Calendar, where folks can sign up for our sessions. If you've enjoyed this show, consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. That supports everything that we do, including our network of podcasts and our magazine Codex. You can find out more about all of that at gauntlet-rpg.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at GauntletRPG or on Facebook at the Gauntlet.rpg group. Please consider rating and reviewing our show. It really helps us out. And thanks very much for listening. Thanks, Misha, for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Misha. It was so great to have you.
It was so much fun.
Thanks, everyone.